Let's unpack what has been a fairly eventful ANC policy conference. No real fireworks to talk of, but it's only once you start digging down into the details and the minutiae of what is being said by current leaders and former ANC leaders and even former ANC presidents and countries' presidents, where you start to get a sense of what this policy conference is all about, and hopefully what it could be as we move towards the elective conference later in the year. Back with us, Lihle Ngcobozi, political analyst, joining us. Good to have you back, Lihle. So I want to talk about some of the big talking points from yesterday coming out of those closed sessions. But I think without a doubt, tell me if you agree, the interview of the weekend that we had here on ENCA, and probably the interview of the weekend for anybody, has got to be the former president, Thabo Mbeki, in the studio, in fact, on your chair, talking to Dan Moyane yesterday, saying the ANC is at its weakest. I mean, that is a lot of history to go through since '94. For a former president to come out, this is the weakest point.
I mean, Thabo Mbeki has been part of the ANC ranks since he was, since from his youth right up until his presidency. And so for somebody of that kind of historical footing within the party to say that really tells us that the party really is in a crisis. It was in a crisis during his term as well, but now we're really seeing that the cracks are running quite deep. And it is up to the current president, Cyril Ramaphosa, and if he secures the next term, of course, for him to try to right that ship and to steer it in the right direction. And hopefully the recommendations that come out of this policy conference, of course, the recommendations that will be made in the conference at the end of the year, will probably try to find a direction that will, bring the party out of this moment of crisis. But I'm not sure that this is that's going to happen.
Why?
However, we remain hopeful. I just think the level of conversation that has been taking place, if you look at the feedback sessions from last night, the level of debate and the quality of debate seems incredibly entry level for a party that has been
very superficial.
Yeah, for a party that has been grappling with these kinds of issues throughout its liberation sort of struggle, even now as the incumbent for close to 30 years, the level of the debate for me is quite shallow. And it's not showing us that this is a party that actually knows what to do, one, and two, that it's a party that is modernizing, right? And I don't think that it's modernizing at the rate at which it is required. And so we are grappling with issues that could have been solved years ago, but now are becoming policy positions that don't necessarily need to be contested and debated in this forum.
So when we talk about the quality, I'm glad you mentioned the word quality. So I'm hearing a helicopter going over us somewhere. I'm trying to figure out where it's flying over Nazareth for. When we talk about the quality, we'll use that word for a moment, not just the quality of debate. Actually, no, I think it could be tied into the quality of debate. This helicopter really is quite low. Give us a second. There he goes. So it's also got to do with what the former president was saying. It's the quality of membership. So if they're questioning the quality of membership, it's going to directly translate to what you're talking about, the quality of debate, isn't it? So how do they fix the quality of membership?
I mean, the president, former president rather, yesterday spoke about there needs to be a vetting process, and I think a lot of delegates have been speaking about what are the vetting processes in place for new members that are coming into the party. And then my question then becomes, does the party even have the capacity to deal with the large number of members that it attracts, and what kind of vetting processes are going to be in place? Are you going to do lifestyle audits? Are people going to be willing to sort of submit themselves to that process? And of course, not all ANC members or people that are attracted to the party require that kind of lifestyle audit. But what kinds of ethical considerations is the vetting process going to be able to make? And also, is it going to be able to reintroduce sort of the intellectual arm and the intellectual capacity of the ANC? And at the moment, I think, apart from internal weaknesses, I also think intellectually the party is at its weakest, in that it's not able to generate new ideas. It's leaning towards things that were spoken about, in the early iterations of the Freedom Charter, in the iterations of sort of the second transition. We've seen that in the white papers around transforming the economy. So all of those things are they're not new discussions that the party is having. These are discussions that have been going on for decades, and the inability to move beyond those kinds of discussions with real material consequences for the lives and impacts of people that are living in South Africa shows us that there is sort of an ideas deficit that's happening in the party.
And that's going to become a problem come the next general elections as well, because are you beginning to get a sense that this is all just starting to feel like the same conversation? You can almost go back and get the policy documents from the previous policy conference, go and get the opening addresses of the former presidents. It's all starting to sound a little bit the same, and I'm wondering if perhaps what the issues with the ANC at the next elections is, those votes that they're going after, nothing sounds new, nothing sounds concrete. We're just sort of rehashing the same thing, and it's going to be dangerous come next elections, isn't it? Because local government elections, we've already seen a decline of the ANC.
Definitely.
Something needs to change.
And I think what is also what the problem that poses is that people also then just choose not to vote.
Apathy.
Yeah. So the apathy increases, and it's not that people are voting for other parties. They're just choosing not to vote at all. And the ANC could bank on that to say, we are seeing that the general South African population sometimes don't see an alternative to the ANC, excuse me, and therefore would rather not vote, and punish the ANC by not voting as opposed to giving their votes to someone else. And so that should be the kind of internal thinkings that the ANC need to be thinking about how then do we win back those votes that are abstaining altogether, who were once part of our sort of electorate or our people that are voting for us, and now are just choosing altogether not to do it. And so what is the strategy around that in attracting our voters again, but also attracting a younger electorate? How do we bring those people back into sort of not only just voting, but voting for the party?
Just a last question. I want to sort of leave it to you which of the various policies they were discussing yesterday, but I'd like to get your thoughts because we're headlining it, of course we are, that terrible attack in Krugersdorp with the 67 illegal miners, this awful gang rape of this young 19-year-old woman. How did you see the ANC and the way they're going to handle GBV? Because when you have a story like that, you've got a problem, don't you? You've got the debate around GBV. You've also got a debate around how the police are being handled. Where does that issue get dealt with first? Is it a police issue? Is it a policy issue? How do we try and get on top of this GBV scourge?
I think it's an intersecting issue, right? Because it speaks to criminality in South Africa and the inefficiencies of the policing system. It also speaks to GBV more generally. Like, we do have a GBV crisis in South Africa, and we also find that the institutions that are meant to be governing over GBV and our gender-specific institutions, such as your CGE, the Department of Women, as of course the legal system as well, in some ways are supposed to create the kinds of conditions where this doesn't happen, and in the event that it does, create the resources for people to find some sort of remedy. And we also know that that's probably not going to take place. And then we also know the socioeconomic conditions that create the kinds of criminalities that we are seeing. So it is an intersecting issue that deals with the lack of infrastructure around policing and the inability of the police to police effectively, the GBV crisis around not dealing with cultures of masculinity and patriarchy and so forth, and also the socioeconomic issues around why people then enter into criminal behaviors, because there's sort of no access to income, and so people make use of external, very weird behavior. And so the party as well, when I was listening to the minister, Lihle Ngcobozi, who's the chair of one of the commissions, she really had no plan apart from chemical castration. And that for me showed that there really is no direction here. So it is a crisis that I think the ANC is just not able to grapple with.
And I think a lot of people are saying right now this chemical castration is just reactionary. It's not actually going to solve the issue as well, but I appreciate you coming in to talk about it. I'm sure we're going to unpack a lot of what came out of that discussion with this chemical castration as well. But Lihle, so good to have you on ENCA as always. Lihle Ngcobozi, political analyst, joining us here on the South African Morning.